At the company's meeting, my wife's father, the CEO, said coldly, "We're letting you go. Performance issues." When I got home, my wife handed me a list of homeless shelter and said, "Now that you're jobless, I don't need you anymore." I left silently. Few days later, she and her father called me 164 times. After realizing who I really was, there's a certain kind of silence in corporate boardrooms that feels like a funeral for your paycheck. That's the sound I walked into that morning, 15 minutes early, because being punctual is apparently the last shred of professionalism I have left. The place looked like it was designed by someone who thought emotionally cold was a color palette. Mahogany table so polished you could perform surgery on it. Chrome chairs that squeak just enough to remind you you're replaceable. An air conditioning set to polar betrayal. I took my usual seat near the middle because I'm a humble man. Humble enough to pretend I wasn't married to the CEO's daughter, and humble enough to keep showing up despite knowing every meeting felt like a trap dressed in a tie. At the head of the table sat Gregory Whitmore, founder, CEO, and self-appointed god of Whitmore Systems. He was the kind of man who made motivational posters obsolete because he sucked the motivation out of everyone in a 10-foot radius. Next to him sat Tracy from HR, whose personality was somewhere between a beige wall and a dial-up tone, and two board members who looked like they'd rather fake their own deaths than attend another one of these. I sat down, nodded politely, and waited for the inevitable. "Evan," Gregory started, his voice smoother than a tax audit. "Thank you for joining us." "Oh, it's my pleasure, Greg. I love being ambushed before breakfast." He shuffled some papers dramatically, probably for effect since men like him think rustling paper equals authority, and gave me a smile so forced it might have needed physical therapy afterward. "We've reviewed your department's performance," he continued, "and unfortunately, the results aren't meeting expectations. Now, for context, my department's results were responsible for saving this company from 3 cyber attacks, optimizing their system efficiency by 41%, and boosting their annual report credibility enough to keep Gregory's yacht dreams alive. But sure, performance issues. I resisted the urge to laugh because HR was there, and Tracy documents joy as a disciplinary concern. Performance issues? I repeated, keeping my voice calm, though internally I was performing stand-up comedy in my head. That's interesting, considering last quarter's numbers beat projections by, what was it, 1.5 miles? Gregory gave me that corporate smirk, the kind rich men practice in the mirror when they know they've already won. "This isn't personal, Evan. It's business." The universal line people use right before they stab you with a smile. He slid an envelope toward me like it contained anthrax. "Your termination letter. Effective immediately." He even had the nerve to use my full name on the top line, Mr. Evan Rivers, like he was addressing a defendant. "Security will escort you out after you clear your desk. Now, here's the thing about being married to your boss's daughter. You know when he's bluffing, because the man's ego can't resist performing. He expected me to argue, to beg, to maybe grovel a little, maybe pull the 'I'm your son-in-law' card. Instead, I smiled. Not the polite kind, the slow, unsettling one that makes people check if their wallets are still there. "No need," I said, standing up. "I remember the way out. It's right past the people I made rich." Tracy blinked. One of the board members coughed into his tie to hide a laugh. Gregory froze for a second, like someone had glitched his software. I took the letter, tucked it neatly into my briefcase like it was an invitation to my own liberation, and buttoned my jacket. As I headed for the door, I caught my reflection in the glass, calm, collected, but with that twitch of disbelief you get when you realize the people you helped climb the ladder are now kicking it away. Gregory said something as I reached for the handle, something like, "You'll regret this," but it came out muffled, drowned under the weight of his own arrogance. Walking out, the office looked different, like I'd been watching it under a filter and someone finally turned it off. The interns avoided eye contact. The receptionist gave me that, "I wish I could hug you, but HR has cameras" look. My ID badge felt heavier than usual, symbolic, maybe, or just irony's way of saying hello. I dropped the badge into the security tray and walked through the revolving door like a man exiting a cult. The cold air hit me like freedom wearing cologne. I half expected someone to run after me shouting, "Just kidding." But no, silence. Pure, uncut silence. The kind that says, "You're finally out, man." On the way to the parking lot, I thought about how surreal it all felt. Fired by my father-in-law for performance issues. This is the same man who once told me I was the future of Whitmore Systems. I guess the future got too smart for comfort. Maybe he thought getting rid of me would tighten his control. Newsflash, it just loosened my leash. By the time I got into my car, a black 2018 Tesla that Alyssa always said made me look like I was compensating for something, I was oddly calm. No screaming, no cursing, no dramatic soundtracks swelling in the background. Just a quiet hum of realization. They thought they'd ended me, but they'd just signed a sequel. I drove out of the parking lot, past the building that had been both my paycheck and my prison. And as I waited at the red light, I saw Gregory's reflection in the mirrored lobby window, standing, arms folded, staring after me like a king watching a pawn escape the board. I gave a little wave, the kind that says, "You'll miss me when your servers crash," and pulled away. Traffic was light. The radio played some upbeat song that didn't match my mood, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was on someone else's schedule. My phone buzzed twice. Alyssa. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to explain to my wife that Daddy Dearest had just fired me. Knowing her, she'd probably ask if it meant she had to cancel her spa appointment. Halfway home, I stopped for coffee at this hole-in-the-wall diner where the waitress called everyone Han, and the coffee tasted like ambition and regret. I sat by the window, took a sip, and finally laughed. Not a bitter laugh, more like the kind that bubbles up when you realize the joke's on them. They thought they'd thrown me out. They'd actually set me free. Still, I replayed the meeting in my head. Every detail, every micro-expression. Because I knew Gregory's type. Men who confuse control with competence. He'd built an empire on fear, on intimidation, on the idea that everyone was replaceable. Everyone except him. And that, my friend, is the Achilles heel of every self-made tyrant. They think they're invincible right up until the moment they trip over their own ego. I finished my coffee, left a tip big enough to make the waitress smile, and walked out with one clear thought. They had no idea who they'd just fired. They thought they'd taken my job, but they'd forgotten. I built the damn foundation they were standing on. Literally. As I got back into my car, the sun broke through the clouds in that dramatic movie way, like the universe was throwing me a bone. I turned the ignition, grinned, and said to myself, "Congratulations, Evan. You just attended your own freedom party. Dress code, fired." You expect sympathy, maybe a shoulder squeeze, or at least a "we'll get through this" speech. What I got was my wife, Alyssa, sitting at the kitchen island in silk pajamas that probably cost more than my first car, swirling wine like she was auditioning for a commercial called Divorce, the prequel. She barely looked up from her phone. "You're home early," she said, in that tone people use when the pizza arrives before they're ready to tip. "Yeah," I said, setting my briefcase down. The company decided to go in a different direction. Apparently, that direction doesn't include me. Her head snapped up, and I swear, her eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning, and she just unwrapped a new personality disorder. "Wait, you got fired?" she asked, leaning forward, smile creeping across her face like she'd been waiting for this exact headline. If love is patient and kind, whatever this was belonged in a horror movie. She reached into her designer tote, her emotional support purse, and slid a folded piece of paper across the marble countertop. It had that crisp, deliberate fold of something pre-planned. I unfolded it and found a list of homeless shelters. I blinked, looked at her, looked back at the list. Each shelter was neatly highlighted in pink, with one circled and a note scribbled beside it, "Free Wi-Fi." She sipped her wine like a Bond villain. "Now that you're jobless," she said, "I don't need you anymore." There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes he's not part of a marriage, he's part of someone's brand. This was mine. I stared at her, trying to process how a woman who once cried because I forgot to buy oat milk now looked like she was about to write an eviction notice on my forehead. "You had this ready," I said, not really asking. She shrugged. "Greg told me last week that things weren't going well at work. I figured this was coming." "Ah yes, Greg, father of the year, destroyer of careers, and apparently the family grapevine." "So," I said, trying not to laugh, "you had time to make a list. That's considerate. You even picked one with free Wi-Fi. Thoughtful." She didn't even blink. "You're not funny, Evan. You've been dragging me down for years. My friends are moving forward in life, getting sponsorships, launching brands, marrying up, and here you are, still playing tech boy. I almost wanted to applaud. The audacity was Olympic level. Tech boy? You mean the guy who's been paying for your yoga retreats, your car, and the half of this house your brand deals haven't touched? Details, she said with a smirk, pouring herself another glass of wine. You should have aimed higher. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. Funny thing, Alyssa, you said the same thing on our wedding night. That got a glare sharp enough to slice marble. She stood, the robe falling slightly off her shoulder like she practiced dramatic exits for sport. You're not going to beg? She asked, almost disappointed. No, I said. I don't do sequels. I grabbed my bag, just a duffel with some essentials, and started walking toward the door. She followed, laughing. Where are you even going? You don't have a job. You don't have a place. What? You think you're just going to wander off into the sunset like some movie hero? I looked back at her, smiling. No, Alyssa. I'm going to go find peace. You should try it sometime. Her face twisted. You'll come crawling back. Probably not. But hey, I said, patting the counter where her wine glass sat. Cheers to wishful thinking. I left before she could reply. The door clicked shut behind me, and I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. The night air hit different, sharp, honest, almost friendly. I tossed my bag in the trunk and sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked like someone halfway between heartbroken and free. Maybe both. I laughed quietly to myself. Fired by my father-in-law. Dumped by my wife. And gifted a list of homeless shelters. You couldn't script irony better if you tried. I started the car and drove aimlessly for a while, the radio humming low. My phone buzzed with notifications. Emails from Whitmore Systems HR, exit procedure, nonsense. The kind of digital paperwork that officially turns you into a ghost in their system. I ignored it. I was done being their punchline. I pulled into a 24-hour diner somewhere off the highway, the kind of place where the lights flicker like they're haunted and the menu hasn't been updated since Y2K. I ordered a black coffee and a slice of pie I didn't really want, because apparently that's what unemployed guys do when their lives implode. They develop a sudden appreciation for diner desserts. As I stirred the coffee, I thought about Alyssa's face when she handed me that brochure. She wasn't angry or hurt. She was pleased. Like firing me was her glow-up moment. The influencer wife finally free from her boring IT husband. The same woman who couldn't reset her Wi-Fi password without texting me in tears. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. The waitress came by, refilling my cup. You okay, hon? You look like you just lost your job and your wife in the same day. I chuckled. You psychic or just observant? Observant, she said. Men who order pie at 10 p.m. usually got stories. Yeah, I said, smirking. Mine's called I Married My Boss's Daughter. Spoiler alert, it ends badly. She laughed, shaking her head. Well, at least you're laughing. That's something. It was. Because under the chaos, under the sting, there was something else simmering, relief. A strange, liberating kind of peace that comes when you realize the worst has already happened and you're still breathing. I finished the pie, paid, and headed back to my car. The dashboard clock read 11:32 p.m. I sat there for a second, staring at my phone. One missed call, from Alyssa. Probably wondering if I'd checked into Hope Shelter with Wi-Fi yet. I ignored it. Then another came in, from an unknown number. Mr. Rivers, this is Carl from Whitmore Systems Security. Sir, we didn't realize you still had access to the system servers. Could you? Please confirm. I hung up before he finished. Oh, I still had access all right. And unlike Greg, I knew exactly how much that access was worth. As I leaned back in my seat, the first real smile of the night spread across my face. They thought they'd buried me. They'd just handed me a shovel, and I was about to start digging in the other direction. I started the car again, this time with purpose. The road ahead looked open, dark, full of possibilities, and revenge, maybe. Sweet, calculated revenge. The kind that doesn't need shouting, just strategy. And as I pulled away from the diner, Alyssa's list of shelters sat folded on the passenger seat. I picked it up, glanced at it, and laughed out loud. Then I rolled down the window and let it fly into the night air. Because if she thought I was homeless, she clearly forgot who built the house in the first place. Leaving without a fight sounds noble until you're packing a duffel bag with the same calm energy of someone deleting their entire Spotify playlist after a breakup. I didn't throw a tantrum, didn't smash a single wine glass, mainly because all the expensive ones were technically hers. I just left, silent, composed, and inconveniently dignified. But inside, my brain was hosting a full-blown fireworks show of rage and relief. When I closed the door behind me, I felt the kind of quiet that usually follows an explosion. I checked into a small apartment across town, the kind of place where the walls had seen things and didn't judge you for yours. It wasn't luxury, no marble countertops or scent diffusers shaped like swans, but it was mine. I paid 6 months up front in cash because, contrary to popular belief and my wife's assumptions, I wasn't broke. Not even close. Alyssa thought I was out there looking for a shelter with free Wi-Fi. Bless her clueless little heart. My father-in-law thought I'd be groveling for mercy within the week. Cute. What neither of them knew was that my bank accounts had layers, like onions, or better yet, offshore onions. Cayman onions. See, years ago, I learned that marrying into power means learning to play the long game. While Gregory Whitmore was busy building his empire of overpriced mediocrity, I was quietly building something smarter. My secret project, Nexaware Technologies, started as a hobby, something I worked on during those useless IT support shifts Greg forced on me. I remember him saying once, "Son, some people are visionaries, and some just fix the Wi-Fi." I smiled that day because I already knew which one I was. Nexaware was a cybersecurity platform so advanced even Whitmore Systems couldn't crack it, and they tried. 3 years ago, when they acquired it, Greg strutted around like he'd made the deal of the century. The acquisition documents were clean, the money wired, and the patents secured under a shell company name he didn't think twice about. Rivers Innovations. Guess what the E stands for, Greg? Evan. Rivers. Me. What no one realized was that I never sold the controlling license. I sold them access, temporary, renewable access, tied to a separate holding company registered offshore. They thought they'd bought a product. What they really bought was a subscription with me, as the admin 12% ownership remained mine. Hidden, legal, and quiet. It was like owning the land beneath someone's mansion and waiting for the day they forgot to pay rent. So technically, when Gregory fired me, he also fired his biggest silent investor. Poetic, isn't it? The man spent years reminding me that I was lucky to be family. Turns out, he was the one living off my code. I sat on the worn couch in my new apartment that night, scrolling through the news on my laptop. Whitmore Systems had just posted a glowing press release, Strategic Leadership Realignment to Enhance Operational Efficiency. Translation: they fired the son-in-law and hoped the stock wouldn't notice. I chuckled and poured myself a drink from the minibar. Cheap whiskey, but somehow it tasted like champagne. Then came the texts. Alyssa, predictably first, "You really left?" I stared at the message for a good minute before replying. "Yep." Even packed the air you breathe. Then I muted her thread. Next, a message from an unknown number. "Mr. Rivers, this is Kevin from Accounts. Just a heads up, the Whitmore server renewal date is approaching. Are you handling the license renewal? Or should we contact Nexaware directly?" I smiled. "Oh, Kevin. Sweet, oblivious Kevin." I typed back, "Leave it with me," because I already knew exactly what I was going to do. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30, not out of discipline but habit. Years of early meetings had programmed me like a lab rat. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started running diagnostics on the Nexaware backend. Watching those systems hum in real time, knowing every alert, every password, every key file belonged to me, was better than therapy. Whitmore Systems' entire security infrastructure ran on my software. Their contracts, their client databases, their internal communications, all of it. I ran a test lockdown, just for fun. For 20 glorious seconds, Whitmore Systems' firewall went dark. Then I restored it. Like a god playing peekaboo. That's when it hit me. Silence is louder when it's planned. I decided then and there. I wouldn't rant, wouldn't confront, wouldn't seek revenge with fireworks. No, my revenge would sound like a slow, tightening valve. The kind that leaves them gasping before they even realize who's holding the handle. By noon, I'd set up a new LLC under another alias, Rivers Consulting Group. The name sounded boring enough to avoid suspicion, but important enough to get taken seriously. I opened new accounts, restructured my remaining assets, and funneled the Nexaware ownership into a trust. Not the kind of trust you name your kids in. This one had clauses that would make Wall Street lawyers weep. If anything happened to me, the controlling rights reverted to my mother's foundation, not Alyssa, not Gregory, not anyone with the last name Whitmore. At 2 p.m., I got a call from Marcus, my oldest friend and the only person who knew half of my plan. "Heard the news," he said. "You alive or plotting a Netflix special?" "Both," I replied, sipping my coffee. Marcus laughed. "So what's next? You gonna torch their servers or meditate your way to forgiveness?" "Neither," I said. "I'm going quiet." "Quiet?" he repeated, skeptical. "You don't do quiet." "Exactly," I said. "That's why it'll work." That night, as I walked down the street toward a corner store to grab dinner, because apparently revenge planning burns calories, I passed a billboard for Whitmore Systems' new ad campaign. Innovation built on integrity. I laughed so hard a stranger looked concerned. If only they knew the foundation of that slogan was currently sitting in my laptop, sipping whiskey and reprogramming destiny. I got back to the apartment, microwaved some instant noodles, and watched the city lights flicker outside the window. Somewhere across town, Alyssa was probably live-streaming her heartbreak for sympathy points. Gregory was probably polishing his whiskey decanter, believing he'd cut out the weak link. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my tiny apartment, grinning like a man who'd just realized he owned the chessboard. There's a power in walking away without slamming doors. People mistake your silence for defeat, but really, it's you taking notes. Every insult, every dismissal, every smug smirk, they all become data points in a blueprint for payback. And trust me, mine was already in version 2.0. Before going to bed, I checked one last thing, the Nexaware renewal contract. Expiration, 7 days. 7 days before Whitmore Systems would realize just how much of their kingdom rested on borrowed ground. I closed my laptop, turned off the light, and lay back on the couch, smiling into the darkness. They thought I'd walked away empty-handed. But here's the truth. When you're the architect of the system, even the wreckage belongs to you. 3 years before that boardroom firing squad, before Alyssa perfected her "I married down" routine, and before I learned that silence could ruin empires, I was just the tech guy in a corner cubicle of Whitmore Systems. Gregory Whitmore, my beloved father-in-law and part-time Bond villain, had generously offered me a starting position. Translation: know your place, marry the daughter, and maybe, if you kiss enough corporate rings, you'll be allowed to fetch coffee at executive meetings. I still remember the first day. He walked me around the office like I was a rescued stray dog he was proud to domesticate. "Everyone, this is Evan," he said, clapping my back with the kind of enthusiasm that hurts your kidneys. "He's Alyssa's husband, and our new IT support specialist." The crowd gave polite smiles, the kind people save for toddlers showing off finger paintings. "Work your way up, earn your stripes," Gregory said, handing me a laptop that looked like it survived the Cold War. That was his mantra. What he meant was, "I own you now, son." But here's the thing. When someone treats me like I'm beneath them, my brain goes into what I call hidden genius mode. It's that mental gear where you pretend to follow orders while secretly rewriting the universe behind their back. So while Greg thought he had me buried in help desk tickets, resetting passwords, removing viruses caused by interns watching sketchy anime, I was quietly building the skeleton of something that would one day make him sweat through his imported suits. Let's talk about those passwords for a second. The CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech company used Gregory 123. No, I'm not kidding. When the man who lectures others about cybersecurity protects his empire with the enthusiasm of a MySpace user, you know you're in for a ride. Every time he forgot his password, he'd summon me to his office like a tech priest. I'd stand there, watching him type the same wrong thing over and over while muttering, "I don't know what's wrong. It worked yesterday." "Yeah, Greg, and so did your metabolism." Anyway, during one of those emergency IT sessions, I realized how much access I actually had. The man gave me full admin privileges across half the company's systems, thinking I'd only use them to fix printers. Bless his arrogance. I started using my downtime to write lines of code, snippets, algorithms, entire frameworks that would one day become Nexaware's foundation. I'd run simulations after hours, encrypt everything under my alias Rivers, and store the data in a cloud server he didn't even know existed. Meanwhile, Alyssa was too busy curating her online life to notice. Every night she'd sit on the couch with her laptop, rehearsing her influencer voice. "Hey guys, it's Alyssa here. Remember to subscribe for my self-care secrets." Meanwhile, I was in the home office writing security architecture that would make the NSA blush. Our marriage was basically two people living in parallel universes. Hers made of filters and hashtags, mine made of firewalls and revenge potential. At board dinners, Greg loved mocking me in front of everyone. He'd say things like, "You know, Evan here is great with computers. He's basically my in-house tech support." Everyone laughed, including Alyssa, who once added, "Yeah, he even fixes my phone when I drop it in my mimosa." Haha, hilarious. I smiled, nodded, and mentally filed away each humiliation under future payback material. Because that's how hidden genius mode works. You collect insults like receipts. What Greg didn't know was that every time he bragged about his company's next-gen security line, he was really talking about my code. I was the one writing the algorithm that detected intrusion patterns and automated risk isolation. The company thought they were testing a prototype designed by their R&D team. Nope, that was me. Rivers Innovations, quietly patenting every single improvement under my mother's maiden name. By the time the patents were approved, I legally owned the digital backbone of their system. I even got a congratulatory email from the U.S. Patent Office while I was unclogging Tracy from HR's printer jam. Talk about poetic balance. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't out to destroy Greg. Not at first. I just wanted to build something of my own, something that wasn't constantly under his thumb. But every smug smirk, every dismissive, "maybe next time, Evan," every time he corrected me in meetings just to hear himself sound smarter, it all added up. By the end of my second year, I realized I didn't just want independence. I wanted leverage. And leverage, my friend, is an art form. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's hidden in contracts, in code, in fine print. So while Greg believed he was investing in a tech acquisition to boost his market share, I was quietly positioning myself as the invisible landlord of his empire. The Nexaware deal came up in a board meeting one summer afternoon. Greg strutted into my cubicle later and said, "We just acquired a small cybersecurity firm for peanuts. Should make us bulletproof." I nodded, pretending to be impressed. "Wow, great move, sir." He laughed. "Yeah, their founder's anonymous. Some genius who doesn't understand valuation. Idiot probably sold us a gold mine for scrap metal." Oh, Greg, if I'd had popcorn, that moment would have been cinematic. By year 3, I had everything set. The code was fully integrated, the licenses automated to expire on a schedule only I could renew, and the patents watertight. I was a ghost in his system, a line of code he'd never see coming. But I still showed up every day like a model employee. Fixed printers, updated firmware, smiled during meetings while he bragged about his software saving the company millions. I even clapped during his presentations. That's how you hide a revolution. You act like a fan. The final straw came one Friday evening. Greg was hosting his annual corporate gala, complete with a live band and enough champagne to drown a horse. I was at the buffet table, enjoying my only payment, free food, when he approached with a martini in hand. "You know, Evan," he said loudly, "if you ever get tired of tech support, maybe we'll find you something in the mailroom." Everyone around him laughed. Alyssa joined in, hand on his arm, eyes gleaming. I smiled and said, "Sure thing, sir. Maybe someday I'll run this place from the basement." He chuckled, "Over my dead body." Funny how life foreshadows itself. That night, I went home, opened my laptop, and looked at the digital fortress I'd built. Every line of code, every algorithm, every hidden control, all waiting. I didn't press the red button, of course. Not yet. But I saved the file under a new name, insurance policy. From then on, every condescending look Greg threw my way felt lighter. Every dismissive remark from Alyssa rolled right off. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. They'd built their world on the foundation of my genius, and one day, they'd learn that foundations have expiration dates. So yeah, Greg built a company. But me? I built the back door. When you've spent years being underestimated, revenge doesn't arrive like thunder. It arrives like an email notification. Quiet, polite, devastating. The day after my silent relocation, I woke up to sunlight bouncing off my laptop and the sweet aroma of justice brewing in my coffee maker. My plan was simple: cut the oxygen supply. Not metaphorically, financially, emotionally. Digitally, I'd been married into the Whitmore dynasty long enough to know where every artery was, and more importantly, which ones they didn't even know existed. Step 1. Joint credit cards. Those lovely little rectangles that funded Alyssa's influencer lifestyle. Frozen. One click, and her Starbucks points were officially on life support. I imagined her face at some designer boutique. Card declined, voice quivering as she said, "That's impossible. I'm married to a Whitmore." "No, sweetie. You were married to a Rivers, and he's done financing your delusion." Step 2. The private family trust account. Gregory always bragged about how bulletproof his family assets were. Bulletproof? Sure, but not Evan-proof. The trust had a small maintenance clause tied to an old Nexaware subroutine, something no one ever noticed because it sounded like tech gibberish. The clause said that if the company's main server failed to validate the software license, the trust account's automated investment feed would pause. So I paused it. Not enough to alert the bank, just enough to make Gregory's precious balance sheets twitch. Step 3. The masterpiece. Whitmore Systems Core Security Framework License. My license. Renewal date. Today. Their IT team probably thought it was a routine auto-renewal. Wrong. I declined it. Just click no, that's all. One single click, and the company's firewall started coughing like a 90-year-old smoker. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee, watching the digital chaos unfold through my private dashboard. Within an hour, I could see the internal pings escalating. System error detected. Client access unavailable. Network performance unstable. Music. Gregory's company was glitching harder than a reality show reunion. By day 2, I got a text from Marcus. "Dude, you're on fire. Literally every tech forum is roasting Whitmore Systems." I chuckled and replied, "Oh? Must be a sunspot problem." By day 3, Gregory's secretary accidentally called me. By mistake. Right. Her tone had that mix of panic and politeness usually reserved for people talking to kidnappers. "Mr. Rivers. Hi. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Some of our systems are experiencing downtime, and Mr. Whitmore was wondering if you could, take a look." "Oh, sure," I said cheerfully. "Just have him submit a support ticket through the employee portal." She hesitated. That portal seems to be down too." I smiled into the phone. "Well, that's inconvenient." By day 5, I woke up to 164 missed calls. Most from numbers I recognized. A few from Gregory's lawyer. One from Alyssa, which I ignored because peace and stupidity don't mix. The news headlines were starting to catch wind of the unexplained disruptions at Whitmore Systems. Stock dropped 7%. I made pancakes. Later that day, I went grocery shopping. I was halfway down the cereal aisle when a familiar voice called out, "Evan." It was Brent, one of the junior developers from Whitmore. The kid looked frazzled, like someone who hadn't slept since dial-up. "Man, it's chaos in there," he said, grabbing his head. "Everything's failing. The backup servers are looping, and Greg's in full meltdown mode. Rumor is they're calling in an external consultant." "Oh," I said casually, tossing a box of Frosted Flakes into my basket. "Hope they find someone qualified." He laughed nervously. "You always said they didn't pay attention to infrastructure risks." "Guess you were right." "Guess so," I said, smiling. "Take care, Brent. And hydrate." When I got home, I checked my phone again. Another message from Alyssa. "Dad wants to talk. Just pick up already. Please." I didn't reply. Instead, I sent a polite email to Gregory's assistant. "Dear Ms. Sanders, I appreciate your outreach regarding the recent system instability. Unfortunately, I'm unavailable for consulting at this time. However, I can refer you to a capable IT firm once I finish my pancake." Then I signed it with, "Warm regards, Evan Rivers, founder, Nexaware Technologies." By day 7, the full meltdown hit. Gregory himself called me. I almost didn't pick up, but the temptation was too good. "Evan," he said, his voice hoarse. "We need to talk." "I thought you fired me, Greg," I said calmly. "Corporate restructure, remember?" "That was a mistake," he admitted. "Look, the system failures, these aren't normal. We're bleeding contracts. I know you had access. Maybe there's something you can do to help." There it was. The crack in the king's crown. "Sure, I could help," I said, keeping my tone even. "But that would mean revisiting my role, and my compensation, and my respect, which, last I checked, was terminated without notice." He exhaled. That deep sigh of a man who finally realizes his empire's built on sand. Evan, name your price. I pretended to think. I'll get back to you. Then I hung up and laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. It wasn't about the money. Not anymore. It was about making him feel the helplessness he'd dished out so casually all those years. That night, Marcus came over with beers. So, you're officially a cyber ghost haunting your ex-boss's servers, he said. How's that feel? Peaceful, I replied, clinking bottles. Like a digital spa day. We sat on the balcony, overlooking the city. He whistled. You ever gonna tell him the full truth? That you own the system? Eventually, I said. Right now, I'm enjoying the foreplay. He laughed. You're insane. Maybe, I said. But at least I'm interesting. By midnight, Whitmore Systems' official website had crashed. Their social media page posted an apology so vague it could have been written by a magic 8-ball. I watched it all unfold, not with glee exactly, more like satisfaction. Years of swallowing insults, of smiling through disrespect, of fixing problems I didn't cause. It all led to this symphony of digital karma. Somewhere in their glass tower, Gregory was probably pacing, yelling at everyone but himself, wondering how his incompetent son-in-law could have possibly left such a hole. And Alyssa? She was likely posting a cryptic quote on Instagram like, sometimes endings are new beginnings, crescent moon sparkles, hashtag healing, hashtag self-love. Cute. What they didn't realize was that my silence wasn't weakness, it was preparation. Every smile I gave, every yes, sir, I uttered, every late night of uncredited work, it all built the stage for this. Revenge isn't rage. It's patience in a suit. So yeah, the company was spiraling, the Whitmores were sweating, and me? I was in my little apartment, making pancakes and planning my next move. Because Phase 1 was over. Phase 2, the return, was about to begin. And trust me, when I walk back into that boardroom, it won't be as an employee. It'll be as the man they never saw coming. There are moments in life that feel cinematic even without the background music, and walking back into Whitmore Systems was one of them. 3 weeks after Greg's performance issues stunt, I stood outside the same glass doors I'd been escorted through like an unwanted Amazon return. Only this time, I wasn't coming as the IT guy or the obedient son-in-law. I was walking in as the man holding 70% of their digital oxygen supply. The building looked the same, sleek, sterile, humming with self-importance. But it smelled different. Panic has a scent, and this place reeked of it. The receptionist, bless her, froze when she saw me. Mr. Rivers? She said, as if saying my name might trigger an alarm. Do you, have an appointment? I smiled. No, but your CEO does. She blinked twice, probably calculating whether letting me in counted as career suicide. I'll, notify Mr. Whitmore. Do that, I said, and tell him it's urgent. From his biggest investor. That line worked faster than caffeine. Within minutes, Greg's assistant appeared, visibly sweating. Mr. Rivers, right this way. She tried to sound composed, but her voice had that quiver you hear right before someone's annual review. The elevator ride up was quiet, except for the faint ping of emails flooding her phone. When the doors opened, I was greeted by chaos wrapped in business casual. The boardroom was packed, Gregory pacing like a caged lion, board members whispering, HR pretending to take notes like anyone cared. Tracy from HR shot me a look that said, "Oh God, he's back," which only made me smile wider. Gregory turned when he heard the door close. His face went pale, the kind of pale reserved for ghosts and freshly fired CEOs. Evan, he said, voice tight. You came. I was invited, I said, dropping my briefcase onto the table with a satisfying thud. And honestly, Greg, I missed the ambience. Nothing like corporate despair in the morning. The room went silent, except for the air conditioner trying its best to cool the tension. I took the seat at the end of the table, the seat Gregory had always occupied. He frowned. That's my seat. I leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. Not today. For a few seconds, no one moved. The board members shifted uncomfortably, unsure who technically outranked who at this point. I opened my folder, neatly printed financials, legal notices, and one thick envelope labeled license agreement. Nexaware Technologies. Let's make this simple, I said. 70% of your company's infrastructure runs on software owned by Nexaware Technologies. As of last week, that license expired, which means, legally, Every major client contract tied to that software is in breach. Tracy blinked, her pen hovering uselessly over her notepad. One of the board members, a tall guy named Richard, who always smelled like expensive regret, cleared his throat. You mean to say the company doesn't own its primary framework? I smiled. Oh, they thought they did. They paid for access, not ownership. There's a difference. You'd be amazed how many executives don't read the fine print. Greg's jaw tightened. You deceived us. No, I said. I did my job. You just assumed that meant you owe me too. He slammed a hand on the table, his voice rising. You sabotaged my company. Correction, I said calmly. Our company. You just didn't realize I was on the ownership side. The room murmured. Someone whispered, Is this legal? Another replied, It's brilliant. I continued, sliding a few printed pages across the table. Here's the fun part. While your team's been trying to fix your technical issues, I've been running an audit. Turns out your daughter's little consulting firm has been receiving quarterly transfers from Whitmore Systems, amounting to roughly $1.2 million. No invoices, no contracts, no deliverables. Greg blinked. That's impossible. Oh, I agree, I said. That's why I printed the receipts. Literally. I flipped open a binder and turned it toward him. Neat columns of wire transfers, all linked to Alyssa's company. A. Whitmore Creative Partnerships, LLC. Tracy's jaw dropped. That violates corporate ethics policy section. Save it, Tracy, I interrupted. We all know HR's ethics policy is mostly for decoration. Greg looked like someone had unplugged him. You had access to all this. Greg, I built all this. You gave me full back-end admin access when you made me your IT guy, remember? Said you trusted family. That was your first mistake. A long silence followed. You could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. One board member finally spoke. So what do you want, Mr. Rivers? I looked around the room, taking my time, letting them stew in the discomfort. I want this company to run honestly, which, as of now, means Gregory Whitmore is suspended pending investigation into financial misconduct. Effective immediately, the board exchanged nervous glances. Richard cleared his throat again. You can't just... I can, I said, pulling out another document. Per the bylaws of Whitmore Systems, any shareholder holding more than 10% of the company's intellectual property rights can call for an emergency board vote in the event of compromised leadership. Richard looked at the document, then at Greg, then at me. He's right. Greg's face turned crimson. You can't be serious. You're taking the word of him. Yes, Richard said. Because he's the only one keeping us from bankruptcy right now. Gregory's lips parted like he wanted to argue, but all that came out was a choked laugh. You planned this. Of course I did, I said, closing the folder. You raised me in this shark tank and forgot I had teeth too. Tracy, bless her nervous little heart, tried to regain order. Well, let's proceed with the formal vote. The vote took all of 10 minutes. 5 in favor of suspension, 1 abstaining, and Greg voting against himself. That part was awkward but deeply satisfying. When it was done, Greg slumped back in his chair, staring at the table like it had personally betrayed him. You think you've won, Evan, he said quietly. You think this makes you powerful? I stood, gathering my documents. No, Greg. It makes me free. As I reached the door, he called after me. If you walk out that door, you'll regret it. I turned, met his glare, and smiled. I already did. That's why I'm not staying. I pushed open the boardroom door, and for a split second, I swear the universe slowed down just to let the poetic weight of it sink in. I'd entered that room years ago as the son-in-law, the lucky hire, the background tech guy. I was leaving as the man who'd quietly outplayed an entire corporation using nothing but patience and code. But before I could leave entirely, Alyssa appeared in the hallway. Of course she did, because irony loves timing. She looked perfect, as usual, hairstyled, phone in hand, the face of someone who just lost the Wi-Fi password to her own life. What did you do? She demanded. Fixed a bug, I said simply. Her eyes narrowed. You ruined my father. I tilted my head. No, Alyssa, your father ruined himself. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see it. She stepped closer, eyes gleaming with that mix of rage and entitlement I'd once mistaken for passion. You're not getting away with this. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. Funny thing, you said the same thing on our wedding day. She flinched, just barely. You're a monster. No, I said, adjusting my jacket. I'm efficient. Then I walked away, down the hallway, past the framed photos of Whitmore excellence, past the trembling interns, past every reminder of the empire that once looked untouchable. I took the elevator alone, watching my reflection in the mirrored walls. Calm, composed, slightly smug. By the time I reached the lobby, word had spread. The staff's whispers followed me like a ripple. He took down Greg, the son-in-law. Did you hear he owns the software? I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Outside, the air was warm and alive. My phone buzzed, an email notification from the board. Offer of CEO position, Whitmore Systems. I stared at it for a second, then laughed. The kind of deep, honest laugh that comes from somewhere below the ribs. I typed my reply right there on the sidewalk. Appreciate the offer, but I'm allergic to hypocrisy. Try Ben from accounting. He's had management envy since 2019. Send. I slipped my phone into my pocket, loosened my tie, and kept walking. The city hummed around me, the sun breaking through clouds like some cosmic spotlight saying, "Well done, kid." Revenge, I realized, doesn't need applause. It doesn't need fire or screaming. Sometimes it's just a quiet walk out of a building you once called hell, with your dignity intact, your enemies exposed, and the satisfaction of knowing you didn't just win. You rewrote the whole damn game. News travels fast when rich people fail. It's like oxygen for gossip blogs and blood for business news anchors. The morning after my little boardroom intervention, Whitmore Systems made the front page of every financial paper. Whitmore Systems under investigation for fraud and misconduct. The subheading was my favorite. Insiders claim whistleblower acted within rights as silent shareholder. Whistleblower. That's cute. They made it sound noble. It wasn't noble. It was personal. I sat in my apartment, still in pajama pants, watching the chaos unfold on live TV while eating cereal straight from the box. On screen, Gregory was doing that billionaire damage control thing, standing outside his mansion in a tailored suit, pretending to be calm while lawyers hovered like vultures. This is a temporary misunderstanding, he told reporters. The truth will come out. Yeah, Greg, it would. Unfortunately for you, I wrote it. By 10 a.m., Whitmore Systems stock had dropped 12%. By noon, it was trending on X, formerly Twitter, but still the same dumpster fire. The hashtags were merciless. Hashtag Witless Systems, hashtag Greggate, and my personal favorite, hashtag Father-in-Flaw. Someone even made a meme of Greg's face photoshopped onto the Titanic, captioned unsinkable. Huh. I nearly choked on my cereal. Meanwhile, Alyssa's name started popping up too. Her consulting firm became the internet's new obsession. Screenshots of the financial transfers leaked, her influencer sponsors quietly pulled their deals, and one brand even posted a statement. We at Radiance Cosmetics do not condone unethical business practices. Translation: we loved you until you became bad PR. Alyssa's followers turned on her with lightning speed. The same people who used to comment Queen Energy nail polish on her posts were now writing, "Guess karma doesn't come with a filter." She went from posting outfit of the day videos to posting nothing at all. Radio silence. Which, for her, was basically an obituary. By mid-afternoon, I got a call from Marcus. "Dude, you seeing this? They're imploding." I turned down the TV volume. "I see it. They just announced Greg stepping down temporarily. And bro, Alyssa deleted her Instagram." "Now that's serious," I said. "The world might actually spin off its axis." He laughed. "You're a menace, man." "Correction," I said, leaning back on the couch. "I'm retired." But retired didn't mean disconnected. I still had access to their internal systems, which I checked out of habit. Their servers were holding, for now, but their internal communication threads were pure chaos. Executives panicking, investors threatening to pull funding. One email even read, "Does anyone know who owns the Nexaware IP?" Spoiler, nope. The next day, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Evan, please tell them I didn't know." "Alyssa." I stared at it for a good minute, thumb hovering over the reply button. Then I typed, "You didn't know much, apparently," and hovered again. My better self deleted it. Silence was heavier. Silence made people feel their mistakes in surround sound. Later that afternoon, I took a walk downtown. It was funny how the world kept moving while someone else's empire crumbled. People ordering coffee, walking dogs, honking at traffic lights. completely unaware that somewhere, a man who once called me a charity hire was watching his empire burn. There's poetry in that kind of oblivion. As I passed a newsstand, a headline caught my eye. Tech Titan's son-in-law exposes corruption. Inside the Whitmore scandal. There was a blurry photo of me leaving the boardroom, mid-smirk. I laughed. Great, I muttered. Now I'm the hero no one asked for. That night, I poured myself a drink. Good whiskey this time, not the discount stuff, and toasted the quiet. The kind of peace you earn after walking through fire barefoot and somehow coming out with both shoes. I checked my email one more time before bed and saw something unexpected, a message from Clara Jensen. Clara was an old colleague from my early days at Whitmore, one of the few people who treated me like a human instead of Greg's charity project. The subject line read, "Couldn't resist." The email said, "Just wanted to say I saw what you did. You turned corporate betrayal into a TED Talk. Drink soon? You deserve something better than instant noodles and revenge." I smiled. Clara always had a way with words. The following week, the investigation went public. Turns out, the Securities and Exchange Commission doesn't appreciate creative accounting. The Whitmore's private auditors found discrepancies. Translation, they got caught cooking the books. Greg's offshore assets were frozen faster than last year's turkey, and he was forced to step back indefinitely. Alyssa's mother, Madeline, the walking Botox sculpture, fled to Arizona for spiritual detox, which is rich, considering that woman's soul has probably been on airplane mode since 1987. As for Alyssa, she tried rebranding. She posted one last video, teary-eyed, voice trembling, playing the victim like it was Broadway. "I didn't know what my father was doing," she said, "and I never wanted to hurt anyone." The comments section was brutal. "Girl, you knew. You were cashing the checks. We prefer our influencers with ethics, not offshore accounts." Her video went viral for all the wrong reasons. Within days, her management dropped her, and her name became a punchline on late-night shows. Jimmy Fallon even said, "If you think your family dinners are awkward, imagine being a Whitmore." Meanwhile, I started quietly rebuilding my life. Clara and I grabbed that drink she'd promised, a rooftop bar overlooking the city. She raised her glass. "To poetic justice," she said. "To poetic coding," I replied. She grinned. "You know, you could easily take over Whitmore systems now." I shook my head. "Nah, I'm done babysitting billionaires. I'd rather build something new." And I did. Within a month, I poured a portion of my settlement money into something I called the Thomas Rivers Initiative, named after my late mother. It was a scholarship program for young programmers from low-income backgrounds, kids who reminded me of myself before I learned to smile through boardroom humiliation. We launched with a small press release, nothing flashy, but the applications flooded in. Turns out, when you stop trying to impress the world that burned you, it starts looking at you differently. One afternoon, while reviewing applications, I got another call from an unknown number again. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Evan." It was Alyssa. Her voice was raw, unfiltered. "Ah," I said. The internet's favorite cautionary tale. She ignored the jab. "I just wanted to say, I never thought you'd actually do it." "Do what? Stand up for myself?" "I didn't mean it like that," she said quietly. Dad's destroyed. Mom's gone. And me? I can't even walk into a coffee shop without someone whispering. Sounds like karma's got good aim." Silence. Then she said, "Are you happy?" I hesitated. "Yeah. Happier than I've been in a long time." "You're enjoying this," she accused, voice cracking. "Not really," I said. "Enjoyment implies it was fun. This was necessary." She sniffed, like she wanted to say something else, but instead she whispered, "Goodbye, Evan." "Goodbye, Alyssa." I hung up and sat there for a long time, staring out the window. The city lights blinked back like a Morse code message I didn't need to decode. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't vindictive. I was just done. The world eventually moved on. The Whitmore scandal became old news, replaced by newer disasters and fresher memes. Greg's name still popped up occasionally, in lawsuits, in think pieces about corporate accountability, and once in a charity gala brochure that hilariously listed him as former visionary. Alyssa resurfaced months later in a small town running a yoga studio called Renewal. I almost respected it. Almost. As for me, I kept building. Nexaware thrived, rebranded under my own name this time. No secrecy, no aliases. I even started mentoring young engineers, teaching them not just how to code, but how to read contracts, protect their ideas, and never let anyone treat them like disposable labor. One evening, Clara stopped by my office with takeout. "You ever think about forgiving them?" she asked between bites of noodles. I thought for a long second. "Forgiveness is overrated," I said. "Peace is better." She smiled. "You really turned your pain into profit." I laughed. "I call it emotional capitalism." Weeks later, I found myself back near the Whitmore building. The company had changed its name. Whitmore Systems was now Nexus Global, because apparently slapping new on old sins makes investors feel better. I stood across the street, watching employees come and go. Nobody recognized me. Good. I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to make sure the past really was behind me. The last time I'd walked out of that place, I was angry. This time, I just felt calm. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing you could destroy someone again, but choosing not to. That's real power, the kind that doesn't scream or demand attention. It just exists. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed, an alert from one of the scholarship recipients. A kid named Malik had just landed an internship at a major cybersecurity firm. His message was simple: "Mr. Rivers, thank you for believing in me. One day, I'll build something that changes everything." I smiled. Maybe he would. Maybe that's what all of this was for. Not revenge, not ego, but legacy. Because sometimes, the fall of one empire is just the beginning of another. And this time, the foundation was clean. They say success is the best revenge, but I prefer to think of it as clarity with a payroll. When you've been through humiliation, betrayal, and a corporate soap opera that could win an Emmy, rebuilding isn't just about bouncing back. It's about redesigning the entire blueprint. After the Whitmore fallout, I could have retired. I had more money than I'd ever need, a library of incriminating emails, and front-row seats to watch my enemies' Google reputations rot. But I wasn't interested in Nexaware relaunches under original founder, Evan Rivers, to provide next-gen cybersecurity with integrity. The word integrity wasn't just PR, it was a punchline aimed directly at Greg's ghost. 2 days later, my inbox exploded. Former Whitmore employees, good ones, the real brains, started reaching out. "Hey, Evan, heard what happened. Any openings?" It was poetic justice watching Greg's old talent crawl out from under his crumbling kingdom, looking for leadership that didn't come with a side of condescension. I hired 6 of them immediately. We weren't just a company, we were the Survivors Club. Then there was Clara. She officially joined as COO, though we both knew titles didn't matter between us. She'd been the one person who saw through my polite, "I'm fine" routine during my Whitmore years. "You're not fine," she used to say. "You're just patient." Now, she'd help me turn patience into profit. Our first week was chaos disguised as progress. Coffee spills, code crashes, and an overenthusiastic intern who mistook my vintage keyboard for that old thing taking up space. But it felt alive, real, messy, human. Every ping of a new client inquiry felt like proof the universe wasn't punishing me. It was redirecting me. One morning, Clara walked into my office holding 2 coffees and that mischievous grin she always wore when she had news. "Guess who just called?" she said. "Please tell me it's not Greg," I replied. "I'm out of popcorn." She laughed. "Nope. Better. A Fortune 500 company wants to pilot our new security software. Said they saw your interview on CNBC. I blinked. Interview. She pulled up her phone. There I was on screen, sitting in some studio, looking calmer than a monk on sedatives. The segment was titled, "The Man Who Outsmarted His Father-in-Law." I hadn't realized my quiet revenge had turned into a redemption arc. The anchor asked me what motivated my success, and my recorded self said, "Underestimation. It's the most renewable energy source on the planet." I almost spit my coffee. Did I really say that? Clara smirked. "You did. And it trended." The pilot deal went through. Suddenly, Nexaware wasn't just back, it was booming. We became the cybersecurity firm that companies actually trusted. Ironically, the Whitmore name still popped up, mostly in sentences like, "Please make sure we don't end up like them." That alone was worth another toast. Meanwhile, Gregory's life was unraveling faster than a cheap necktie. The federal audit had unearthed everything from shady vendor payments to falsified expense reports. Turns out, borrowing against future revenue isn't just creative accounting, it's also illegal. His assets were frozen, His board voted him out permanently, and rumor had it he was now living in a smaller residence. Translation: the guest house of his former mansion. Alyssa, on the other hand, had gone quiet. Her yoga studio in Arizona was struggling, and every now and then, she'd post vague motivational quotes like, "Growth hurts, but so does staying the same seedling." I scrolled past every time. Growth might hurt, but humility must have gone extinct in her zip code. Then came something unexpected, an invitation. Not from Alyssa, thank God, but from the Chamber of Commerce. They wanted me to speak at a tech conference about ethical innovation. I nearly laughed out loud. A year ago, I was the guy fixing Wi-Fi for people who called me buddy. Now, I was a keynote speaker. Life really is a stand-up comedian. The conference was held in a swanky downtown hotel with chandeliers so bright they could cook breakfast. I walked onto that stage to polite applause, wearing the same calm smile that once unnerved Greg. My speech wasn't scripted. I just spoke from memory, about the quiet power of being underestimated, about ethics not being a liability, and about how failure is just character development for the sequel. When it was over, I got a standing ovation. Some guy from a major tech magazine came up afterward and said, "That was brilliant. You're like the anti-Whitmore systems." I grinned. Best compliment I've had all week. That night, I got back to the office to find Clara waiting. She was sitting at my desk, feet propped up, reading an email on my screen. "You got another offer," she said. "Government contract. Cyber Defense Initiative. Big money." "Let me guess," I said, walking over. "They want us to fix something that shouldn't have been broken." She nodded. "Pretty much." I looked out the window, the city lights winking like they knew something I didn't. "You think we're ready for that kind of responsibility?" She smiled. "You were born ready. You just had to get rid of your in-laws first." We both laughed. It felt good, light, easy. Not the forced laughter of company dinners or the brittle laughter I used to fake in front of Alyssa's friends. This was the sound of real beginnings. Months passed, and Nexaware became more than a company. It became a culture. No politics, no nepotism, no hidden traps in contracts. I made sure of that. Every Friday, we held open forums where anyone could pitch ideas, even interns. And we had a rule: no one eats alone. Because I'd spent too many lunches alone in the Whitmore cafeteria, listening to people whisper. Our success drew attention. Investors called, journalists emailed, and LinkedIn recruiters suddenly remembered I existed. But I wasn't chasing hype anymore. I'd learned that empires don't fall because of failure, they fall because of arrogance. And I'd had enough of that for several lifetimes. One evening, as I was locking up, Clara stopped me. "You know, you could have just walked away and lived quietly," she said. "Why build again?" I thought about it. Because rebuilding reminds me I didn't just survive them, I outgrew them. She nodded, then added softly, "I'm proud of you, Evan." And just like that, something shifted. The tension, the unspoken history, the quiet connection between us. It was all there, humming in the air. I didn't say anything, neither did she. Some things don't need words. Weeks later, Nexaware hosted its first scholarship dinner for the Thomas Rivers Initiative. Seeing those young programmers, their eyes bright, their dreams unbroken, was like watching a different version of myself. I gave a short speech, mostly improvised. When I started in tech, I thought power meant being in control. Now I know it means giving it away. The room went silent, then erupted into applause. Afterward, one student approached me, a shy kid named Malik. "Mr. Rivers," he said, "I read about what you did with Whitmore Systems. It's inspiring." I chuckled. "Kid, that's just a fancy way of saying I refuse to stay quiet." He smiled. "Well, I'm glad you didn't." Driving home that night, I realized something. Revenge might have started this story, but redemption was writing the ending. The anger was gone, replaced with a strange, calm gratitude. Every insult, every humiliation, every betrayal, it all led me here. I pulled into my apartment garage and sat in silence for a moment, listening to the hum of the engine die down. My phone buzzed, a notification from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I checked it. You were right. Silence does hurt more. No name, but I didn't need one. I stared at the message for a long time, then turned off my phone and smiled. Because finally, I understood. The real rebuild wasn't the company, or the money, or the reputation. It was me. I wasn't the fired employee, the humiliated husband, or the lucky son-in-law anymore. I was Evan Rivers, founder, builder, survivor, and finally, free man. And this time, I wasn't just rebuilding a life. I was designing a legacy. 2 weeks after the scholarship dinner, life had finally settled into something resembling peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need noise to prove it exists. The world had moved on from the Whitmore's implosion, and I had too, mostly. Sure, every now and then a headline would flash across my phone about the disgraced tech patriarch or former influencer Alyssa Whitmore attempting comeback. But I didn't click anymore. That chapter was closed, laminated, and filed under not my problem. Or so I thought, until one Tuesday afternoon, the past decided to call. Literally, I was in my office, halfway through a code review and a bad sandwich, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but something about the timing, 3:14 p.m., the universe's favorite hour for irony, made me swipe. I didn't answer, though. I let it go to voicemail. Old habits die stylishly. A few minutes later, I saw the notification, one new voicemail. I hit play, not expecting much. Probably a spam call about my car's extended warranty. What I heard instead froze me mid-bite. Evan, it's me. Alyssa. For a moment, I just stared at the phone like it had betrayed me. Her voice was softer, slower, missing that trademark smugness that used to fill every room she walked into. I know you don't want to hear from me, she continued, her tone brittle around the edges. You probably shouldn't. I just needed to say something. You never shouted, Evan. You never fought back. You just left. That silence, it's worse than anger. You were the real one, and I see that now. She paused then, audibly exhaling. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I get it now. You didn't leave to hurt me. You left because you finally respected yourself more than I did. Click. End of message. For a solid 30 seconds, I sat there, motionless. My sandwich had fallen apart on the desk, my coffee had gone cold, and the only thing moving was the replay button, because, of course, I hit it again. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to hear if she meant it. Maybe I wanted to catch the faintest trace of regret hiding behind her words. Or maybe I just wanted to confirm that karma really had a voice. You never shouted. You never fought back. That line hit harder than it should have. Because she was right. I hadn't. When everything collapsed, when her father fired me, when she handed me that brochure for homeless shelters, I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just walked away. And silence, it turns out, echoes longer than screaming ever could. After the second replay, I laughed. Not bitterly. Just the kind of laugh that slips out when life circles back with perfect irony. The woman who once accused me of being too calm was now haunted by that calmness. Poetic doesn't even cover it. Clara poked her head into the office. You good? She asked, eyeing the untouched sandwich and the expression on my face. Define good, I said, leaning back in my chair. She frowned. You look like someone who just read an obituary for an ex. Close, I said. I just listened to one. She arched a brow. Alyssa? Yeah. She called you. Voicemail. No tears, no theatrics. Just a neatly packaged apology with guilt sprinkles on top. Clara stepped in, crossing her arms. And how do you feel about that? I shrugged. Somewhere between indifferent and oddly amused. Like watching a car you used to own finally get towed. She smirked. That's disturbingly specific. Yeah, well, closure's a weird thing. You wait for it for years. Then it arrives uninvited during lunch hour. Clara studied me for a moment. You're not going to respond, are you? No, I said. I think silence deserves to finish what it started. She nodded slowly, approving. Good. Because if you do, I'm confiscating your phone. Understood, ma'am. She laughed, gave my shoulder a quick pat, and left me to my thoughts. I hit play one last time, not for her words, but for the closure buried between them. You were the real one, Evan. That line lingered long after the message ended. I couldn't tell if she said it for me or for herself. Maybe both. That night, I didn't delete the voicemail. I just archived it, like a relic. A digital tombstone for a version of me that used to need her validation. Then, because irony is my love language, I poured myself a drink, queued up a playlist titled Peace After Petty, and sat on my balcony watching the city flicker below. The next morning, I got to the office early. Something about that voicemail had me wired in a strange, productive way. I dove into work, tweaking a new Nexaware feature that used AI to predict cyber threats before they even hit. We called it the firewall that thinks ahead. Kind of like me, really. Around noon, Clara popped her head in again. "You're in early. Did you finally find your purpose? Or did insomnia win again?" "Both," I said. "Apparently heartbreak makes good caffeine." She laughed. "So what's next for the great Evan Rivers? You've conquered your demons, rebuilt your empire, made half the tech world jealous, and got a voicemail apology. What's left?" I thought for a moment. Peace. Maybe some quiet success. No drama, no revenge arcs. Just building something that lasts. "Boring," she teased. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Beautifully boring." That afternoon, a journalist called asking for a follow-up interview. I said no. The last thing I needed was to become a soundbite again. They wanted to frame my story as from fired son-in-law to tech titan. I wasn't interested in the mythology. The truth was simpler. I got tired of letting other people narrate my story, so I wrote my own. Later that week, while reviewing scholarship applications, I noticed one essay that stood out. It started with, "Sometimes the smartest thing you can say is nothing at all." I read it twice, smiling to myself. The student talked about learning restraint, about choosing silence over reaction, and about how quiet strength often gets mistaken for weakness. I could have sworn fate was trolling me. I approved that application instantly. Life went on. The Whitmore name faded from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals. Greg was reportedly negotiating plea deals. Alyssa's yoga studio closed after 6 months. Her final Instagram post said, "Starting over again, this time for me." I didn't like it, but I didn't sneer either. Maybe she finally got it. Maybe not. Either way, I had work to do. One Friday evening, Clara and I closed up the office early and went for dinner. We ended up at a small Italian place where the lights were dim, the bread was free, and the wine didn't taste like disappointment. "You seem lighter," she said, swirling her glass. "Yeah," I admitted. "It's weird. I thought I'd feel nothing after hearing that voicemail, but it feels peaceful, like finishing a book you hated but still reading the last chapter." She smiled. "Closure doesn't always come gift-wrapped. Sometimes it just shows up uninvited with bad timing." "Exactly," I said, "but I think I'm finally